I think it's a society we place a lot of emphasis on. I think Uh, I've heard it plenty of times, right? This spark, right? This thing, this intangible thing. I was just thinking about this the other day, right? Like this, like I didn't get a spark. I kissed him. I didn't get a spark. What the fuck was that? Like an electric shock? What did you expect? I don't know.
Hey, you ever listen to music and get sparkles up your back? Or maybe you don't. I don't know. Fuck.
You mean like an ASMR response? No.
You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
I would think you have like a neurological disease and
Actually, there is a name for it. It only affects a certain part of the population, but I want to compare that.
The concept of a spark.
Like the spark is that special feeling when you watch your favorite Twitch stock.
Oh, there you go, right?
It's that feeling
you
with
also get a spark when you
channel.
hit the subscription button. I hear, right? I don't know.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, the biggest spark.
Those bits, man.
Yeah. Well, look, look. They make me tingly. All right, let me tell you. Gift subs and bits make me fucking tingly. That is true. But yeah, there's like this idea of a spark, and thank you, Hyperchill, for being here. I think it's like overblown, right? Like, yes, like you can have. Okay, I guess now that the more I think about it, the more I don't even know where to start with it, because I actually don't know what it is. I really actually don't know what that would even be. Is it like sexual attraction, right? Well, like you don't need to like go on a date to figure out if you have sexual attraction. Well, for most people, if you're like a demisexual, maybe you do. But like for most individuals, you don't need that to arrive at a conclusion. So like you come in some contact with them, or you're talking to them for a long time, and like you feel a thing, but like
I know
it's so ill-defined. Like people say,
do
well,
people
I don't
believe
have
in
that
a
thing,
spark?
so it's not the right one.
Yeah.
Like
I think that yes, I've experienced that before, where you have a connection with someone and it's this instant kind of I wouldn't call it a spark, but like you get chills almost, right? Like, oh wow, this is amazing. The unfortunate thing though is that's so temporary. That's not a good indicator of compatibility, and we can't mistake these things, right? Like that kind of spark, that kind of chills, or whatever you want to call it, is a fleeting thing. In Romeo and Juliet, it's they call it too like the lightning, too fast, too quick, too sudden.
I thought it was
right?
real.
And yeah, I'm not pulling this shit out of my ass.
My life is a
I'm
lie.
an educated young man and know a lot about like fucking plays and shit.
You're breaking my heart, Wick. That's why. I just continue.
He's the arbiter of the heart. He's allowed to.
But these things are just not good. They're not stable. They're not good indicators of compatibility, and we should.
But it
not
is an
be
indicator.
Fetishizing these things.
It is an indicator that doesn't exist always. And why throw away stimulus that's indicative of a specific situation?
It's not throwing it away to put it at the proper valuation. Like we can recognize.
Well, how do we properly evaluate such things?
Which is going off. I mean, properly evaluate things. Like again, I rate it much lower than other people might, but I think that you do yourself a disservice if you rate it too high because it's too temporary.
Well, it might be different per person. We might respond to it differently. So again, it might be individual.
Yeah, and also just because it's temporary, I don't know. Like, you guys are probably gonna disagree. I'm probably gonna disagree.
Tell us, man. Tell us your story.
I like the concept of like a spark. The way I think about it is like, on a biological sense, it's like experiencing something outside of yourself that brings you to a certain euphoria that you don't quite understand and have never experienced before.
I actually just posted an article to the study for this.
It's like morphine, possibly. Like that would be my best guess on what that is. But I don't know if it's something that, in the same way that you kind of like induce like a dopamine kick when you experience some things, it might just be a sort of chemical that you induce on yourself.
Yeah, it's a
when you
sense
see
overload.
that person of something like that, like some sort of sensory thing that happens. So I do believe it I do believe in it, and I do believe that it's something.
There's
that,
definitely physiological
lasts.
responses to unique stimulus. Like when they say that a kid playing Counter-Strike for an hour has the same brain activity as someone on cocaine. We've all heard that before. And who's to say it's exclusive to video game responses? It probably exists in so many scenarios.
That's really cheap.
I have-
A high. Holy shit. But I want to get to stabbing in a second. But like, I'm just like looking at the chat. So I'm hearing what you guys are saying, right? Talking about this physiological response. Looking at the chat, some people are saying it's limerence. Some people are saying it's excitement. Some people are saying it's connecting on all levels and hitting all the right cues when you can just fast lane to the other stuff. So like it's like hitting at all your checkboxes, right? Like everyone is saying it's different things because this is not a consistent like experience, right?
It isn't.
People have.
No, it's
like
not.
and if we're telling people, hey, you should be looking for this spark, and like really to Stabby's point, right? Like how like this was pushed in the media in those movies that we're talking about in sitcoms, right? Like I went out on a date with him and her too, right? But most of this is from a woman's perspective, right? Like I went out on a date and like we just didn't have that spark. What does that mean? Maybe like if you like went on a second date, right? Maybe like a second or third, give them a chance, then maybe you'd feel that thing, or maybe
it's like when people take drugs.
There's
Like,
actually a
sometimes
book
they
written
don't
on
get
this.
high.
It's not something that you look for. I don't think.
There's actually just real quick. There's actually a book that was written, I think, in the last 3 years about this. It's called Don't Go for Mr. Something. I wish I remember the title, but basically the book was about how settling is actually an okay thing to do. That it's okay to settle, because one of the problems that they illustrated in the book and from the data they received is like women especially were holding so much higher standards than men were. Like they asked men, like, what are the standards you would give to go on a second date with a woman? And they mentioned like 4 or 5 things, 4 or 5 criteria. They asked women that same question, and they got an average of like 30 or 40 things that women were looking for, and some of them were just so out of the ballpark. And we're conditioning our people to that everything has to be perfect, that everything has to be exactly right, that spark that you're talking about has to be there, they have to be so wealthy, they have to be so fit, they have to be so
how's it going, guys?
with all these
How's it going?
values and things like that. And it's really doing a number to our social connections here. It's
Well,
really
they say that about
hurting it.
TikTok and Instagram, reprogramming what social beauty is, right? Like I hear that all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's on the
Yeah, but
failure
that's not
of your
the same
subconscious.
critique year after year.
Let's go to Stabby, who I've been promising would go to for a little bit, and yeah, first that, and then we're gonna expand over.
I can welcome the people who've just come in because Prime, you hit it right on the head. Actually, it's a different feeling for everybody, like they were saying in the chat, and I want to point out that I felt that for music. Like if I hear Beethoven's Fifth, like my arms are just like all goosebumps, and I can barely move for a minute. But like, and I'm not gonna listen to Beethoven's Fifth over having sex, but I mean, I haven't ever felt that for sex before.
Both at the same time.
I've done that. It's anyway. So no, I agree with that, and I think that like it is these ridiculous expectations for perfection and this unexplained spark, because the spark is quite frankly bullshit. You can have that spark with somebody years later. Like you see a guy in the park, like, and they're your friend and they're playing with their dog, and all of a sudden like your whole body is like, we should actually be making babies right now. I mean, that's temporary. It's going to go away. So I don't think the spark is something that we should be teaching our kids at all.
I think the spark goes away over time. You don't get that spark the older that you get. It like dulls out. Do you think so, or?
We were talking about that earlier, actually.
And then it takes more for you to like reignite that spark.
So
yeah, Desperado brought that up. He called it limerence. Now that might not be what you're saying, but I never heard the word before, so take it or leave it.
No, it's a obsession, right? It's an obsession with a person, basically. Like this, like deep, like that's kind of that can be unhealthy, at times, but not necessarily so. Hold on, I just need to see something. Hey, are you NJ Palms? Are you? Is that you?
Yeah.
You. Holy crap! I've never seen you.
No, you have. I've been on before, but only
and
for
it was so memorable. And it touched me in a deep spot, and I think about it often.
No, last time I joined, we were talking about like nuclear war or something as I joined, and then it switched to like trans rights, and I did not join for that. And I was like, I was here for nuclear war. I'm just gonna bail out of this. But
this is my second time on.
Yeah, no, I remember you.
What we were talking about the first time.
But Palms, I'd love to hear what you have to say on this, and then we're gonna explain everyone else too.
Okay, you're putting me on the spot here. No, normally I like to stay in the defense world. Oh no! So I joined with Hyper because we were gonna come on here and be a strong defense. Basically, I was just gonna say, oh god, this is gonna get me canceled. Why can't there be a line where people are adults and you just treat them as adults? Because like when I was a certain age, I was like, now it's hard to say because I didn't have like a bad childhood, right? Or like any traumatic experiences. But when I think back, I'm thinking like, well, there was probably a time that I could have managed like certain interactions. And if I'm 31 right now. If I was going to sleep with someone who is like 61, I feel like I could make that call. So I feel like maybe there should be a time that we can just like say someone's an adult at some point. I don't know what defines that per se, but I'm just looking at the headline right now. I don't really know where we were before that.
That was the baseline. We all were in acceptance of like once you hit that adult age, you can make your own free decision.
I don't know about 18 because I remember when I was 18. Like I don't know. I feel like I've changed a lot since I was 18, but I also feel like if I had sex with someone when I was 18, I wouldn't be traumatized. So
yeah,
it's a weird line.
I think it should matter if it's 50 and an 18-year-old. I think it definitely should matter. Like consent does not matter when it's that big of a gap.
Wait, why?
Because a 50-year-old and an 18-year-old.
Would you feel the same with a 60-year-old and a 28-year-old? Same gap?
A 60-year-old and a 28-year-old?
No, so the way I think of it is, if I was the lower age, would I want you to yell at me about my agency?
This is having sex, not relationship. Nothing about their connection. Nothing about what they know about each other, their past or whatever, right?
Oh no, it's encompassing of all possibilities of a relationship. But if you want to take that slice, go with it, man.
Yeah, I mean we can play with the hypo.
Well, yeah, but like the way me and Palms like had hashed it out.
Don't put me on this with you. Don't put me on this.
No.
I want.
No. I don't want to be signed off.
I want Moth to answer the question. If they were 60, 28, like you're not okay with 50 and 18, regardless of consent. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about
not okay with that either.
28?
I'm not okay with that one either.
Why aren't you okay? What about this age difference makes it non-consensual in your mind?
Because it's such a gap in age. The brain doesn't develop when you're that young of an age compared to someone that's has a fully developed brain. What do you mean?
I feel like we're not talking about like brain development. We just assume that once someone has hit like a certain age or a certain maturity level, that now they are okay to accept the parameters. Because you're 100% right that
maturity level insinuates brain development.
No. Right? Listen. So you're right that someone who's 50 probably has a lot of power over someone who's 18. That's absolutely the case, right?
Trick them into doing certain things.
No. But once you hit 18, we as a society say, yeah, you're mature enough to just accept that those ramifications are going to be there. And now you can go and sleep with whoever you want or have any kind of relationship with whoever you want.
So you're saying it's okay for a 50-year-old and an 18-year-old to have sex with consent?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you disagree with that, you just don't agree with the age of consent, and you should just advocate to raise the age of consent because you just don't think 18-year-olds are capable of accepting those.
I think they are. I think they are, but 50
what defines age of consent for you?
You can't say they are, but 50 is too much, right?
No, exactly. What defines age of consent for you?
Too much. I'm taking everything else aside. A 50-year-old.
No, stop. So
stop with
the comparison. What defines age of consent for you? Like, what part of agency? Yeah, what part of agency matters to you? So, like, at what point can someone like die for their country, but not decide who they want to have sex
20
with?
years. Around.
Okay, so why is a 20-year difference important?
Why?
Because 50 and an 18-year-old.
No. Stop with the comparisons. When is a person able to consent? When are they mature enough to just be a person?
18.
Okay, so then what's the issue with this difference?
The difference here that he's weighing is experience. He's weighing life experience over the It shouldn't be considered.
Matters. But that matters for sure. But like, why not calculate that into the age you're talking about?
Okay, there might be.
What if the older person's been in a coma since they're 18?
Sure, yeah, fuck it. Why not?
That doesn't work at all.
Well, I feel like we shouldn't go with like stupid hypotheticals, right? Because age is always—it's just supposed to be like some kind of a correlation to like maturity, right? Obviously, we could think of like a 17-year-old who's probably mature enough to consent. We could probably imagine a 19-year-old who's definitely not mature enough to consent. These are just like guesses. I don't think we should go into these stupid hypotheticals. Yeah. I think the point that you're trying to make, sorry, what's your name? Mothvane, right? You're trying to say that like, I feel like you're treating like development as it's like this linear thing where like 20 years is always going to be the same, but that's obviously not the case. The difference between being 0 versus 20, you have a huge maturity development, right? Difference between being 40 and 60, do you think that's a difference? Probably not, right?
Yeah. Okay, so how do you think a 50-year-old and an 18-year-old would meet up in the real world and get to grow a connection?
Well, it doesn't really matter, right? What I'm trying to say is why do you think a 20-year age difference matters specifically when it comes to like 18 and a 38-year-old, right? Because you said 20 years, so let's not even talk about 50.
I think it does matter because I told you brain development, maturity levels.
When does the brain fully develop?
Yeah, the brain development
at
one.
25,
I don't know if you can defend that.
I think they're saying around 30 now.
Yeah. So do you think like a 25 and a 45-year-old would be fine then? Because if 25 is fully matured,
25 and 50, I would say around 20 years, and then I would say maybe there would be some exceptions if it was like this person saved me from a fucking house fire when I was this age and all my parents.
ERB, a bunch of old dudes are gonna start starting fires and saving.
Why is that the exception? I feel like if that was the case, you'd probably the most shower.
Would you say that this relationship, a 50-year-old and an 18-year-old, would be an outlier of a relationship?
Look, Mothvane, all I'm trying to say here is that
when
we have to draw a line somewhere, and if someone can be old enough to go to war for their country, they're old enough to fuck a 50-year-old. Okay?
Yeah.
If you're old enough to carry a gun and fight in a war, you're old enough to fuck a 50-year-old.
But just like, again, I feel like at this point we're not even talking about age of consent, right? You're just trying to say that like over time you develop more and more experience, right? And a certain amount of years that's just too much to like surpass, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but I just don't. I don't think that
of a thing is what I'm saying.
I just don't think it. I don't think it makes sense though, because the brains don't develop linearly, right? So you would have to have like this sliding scale that constantly is adjusting. Like again, like a 25-year-old brain versus a 45-year-old brain is not that different. But obviously, a 15 versus a 35, that's a pretty big difference, right?
Yeah, 15 versus 50-year-old. Yeah, pretty big difference compared to that for sure.
Sure, we go. I'm just sticking to your 20 years, right? Because we don't have to go to these 35
around
years.
20 years is what I think. I'm not an expert in the area, but that's what I think.
But it doesn't seem like this makes sense because again, like our experience and like our ability to consent, that feels like it kind of caps at a certain point, and that's what the age of consent tries to do.
Well, also you'd have to apply it to other things, right? Like if you didn't think people were able to make conscious decisions as an adult at that age, why could they vote? Why can they go to war? Why can they take on loans? Why can they like do all these things? Like
so okay, how about sugar daddy culture then? Let's talk about that. 50-year-old dude and the 18-year-old woman.
This was the original topic. This is the original topic.
No, so I'm fine with you calling.
We've already gone.
I'm definitely fine with you calling.
With that? Like
Mothvane. What we're trying to say is that
they're okay with it.
When you have a 50-year-old and an 18-year-old, we all understand that there's probably going to be a huge power dynamic, right? We all can agree with that, right? But what we're saying is that once you turn 18, you're now responsible for like the ramifications, and you're allowed to consent. For the same reason why when you turn 18, we say, yeah, you probably understand what it means to go to war.
Let's not normalize a power dynamic of that.
We're not normalizing the power dynamic. We're allowing people to make that decision for themselves.
I just want to say real quick, like what makes age the power dynamic that we have such a problem with? Why isn't it money? Why isn't a 20-year-old who won the lottery and has millions of dollars suddenly not an issue, right?
That's actually that's a really smart
call. It's with a 50-year-old man for his money. Usually.
Yeah, no, but we make a bright line rule about 18 specifically because it's hard to distinguish where the line is for maturity. So we made a bright line rule to protect minors. But after that point, we just assume they're adults.
So
now,
she can just hang around till he dies.
No,
and
you can make the
inherit
argument.
money.
You can make the argument that they are not adults at that point, in which case that's fine. I'm cool with that. You can say we need to make the bright line rule later, but you're not making that case. You're just saying like, well, if something else is involved and something else is going on, maybe it's not fair. You have to decide when someone is an adult and they can manage for themselves.
I mean, I guess the question would be: is that in society, have we seen examples of rich 18-year-olds marrying poor 50-year-olds?
All right. No, there's no. I don't think there's such thing.
No,
I can't pull one out of my hat, right? Like I can pull one out of my hat
mentioned
right
a really
now.
good point, Wick, about age being like
It's
that.
just I mean, they're rare in and of itself.
It should be shamed more. They should be shamed.
Society absolutely values women for age and men for different things. Like, let's not kid ourselves with that. Like, it's going to impact how you see these things. I'm not saying it's good, but
at the crux of the issue, though, is what level do we allow someone to make a choice that might harm them? And we understand that there is a power dynamic at play in relationships with huge power disparities, whether it be gaps in experience, gaps in wealth, gaps in knowledge, gaps in IQ, gaps in looks and attractiveness. All these different things play a part and play a role. What is bothering me is that we're singling out age as a very specific factor, when I don't think age... if you just tell me the age of two people who are in a relationship, as long as both are consenting adults, and we aren't talking about minor shit, which is disgusting, but as long as we're talking about consenting adults here, I cannot make a judgment on how exploitative or not that relationship is based on age alone. It tells me nothing.
Well, I mean, just to challenge that, like you would say that like for like a 14-year-old with a 50-year-old, that's probably right. Just alone, you could tell that there's some exploitation going on there, right? Yeah, exactly, and that's why the age of consent exists, right? That's why we use age as a bar line.
Again, my statement was assuming everyone's of age, right?
Sure.
But also in public, the reason why this is being brought up is that in public IRL, when you more than likely when you look at a 50-year-old or even a 60-year-old standing next to an 18-year-old, the assumption is not that they're in a relationship. That's never, at least I shouldn't say never, but that's not the expected outcome you would assume when you meet that couple.
I would be surprised at how many people look much younger or much older than they are.
And I understand that can happen, but in general, societally, if you're looking at an 18-year-old and a 50-year-old, or even a 60-year-old, the assumption outside looking in, if you don't know that relationship, you're just seeing them in society, more than likely you don't assume that they're in a relationship. You assume that the relationship dynamic is one that's not a romantic one.
I mean, like,
that's why it's out of the norm.
I understand, but I don't assume people are in a
relationship. Say NJ Palms, thanks for being a real one and getting 10 subs. That means a lot. Thanks so much. Okay.
NJ Palms is the true person with the power dynamic on the panel. He is now ineligible to date all of us. But regardless, to address your point there, Sly, I think that for me, and I can't speak for anyone else here, unless people are like holding hands and some sort of PDA, I usually don't assume the people's relationship. I just don't.
Okay. Listen, I'm not saying that I do. I'm just saying if I'm trying to think through where we get the look of where we get this question coming up of a 50-year-old and an 18-year-old in public, as I'm imagining that, at Starbucks or something, they walk in holding hands. My first assumption, personally, I'll just say I would not assume anything of that relationship personally. But if I'm like with family or something like that, and we're like, it's like they're like holding hands or kissing or something like that or making out, it would.
Look, we're all big boys. We can say they're sugar daddies, right? We all know it's a sugar daddy. We can all say you have to beat around the bush.
I guess my question to you is like, I understand how it's against the cultural norms, but at one point, homosexual couples were against the cultural norms. They get these same looks and they get these same kind of prejudices against them. And as I said, like there's no inherent.
It's not a direct parallel, though. It's not.
I understand it's not direct, but I'm just trying to bring it home to the fact that you cannot make exploitation assumptions based on this criteria.
I'm not saying that it would be an exploitation assumption. It would just be, it's questions I've heard uttered in my real life where they've seen people who are well above their age, a 30-year-old, like we saw couples who are like 30 and 60, or 28 and 70. Like you'd see those couples, and when you see those couples, some family members are like, wait, what? What's going on? Like what's the situation? And everyone obviously is thinking that, but in thinking that power dynamic, it's indicating, it's showing kids, it's showing society that this is something that is not the norm. And I'm not saying that it should, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, which is the distinction I'm trying to make here. When you bring up the example of where interracial couples were shunned upon, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. I'm just saying that this is why people see it out of the norm, and things that are seen out of the norm also need to be protected in the same way that we do our best to protect heterosexual relationships. We should seek to protect relationships that are outside the norm as well. And that's what I was trying to say, that we need to support and have better understanding of these relationships and ask more questions around these relationships.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
No problem. You were giving us interesting takes. Okay, so Hypertroller, I don't think you really had a chance to say much, so I want to give you space to do that. And thanks for being here. And also, if Ridiculous or Double Shine want to jump back in, then I'd love to have them. So go ahead, Hypertroller.
Sorry about that. Just like when it's about I think the main, at least the main Palms had hit prior to hopping on, was like a normative thing versus like a creepy thing, and like how it can be an okay thing, like if an 18-year-old and a 50-year-old go out or whatever because they're two adults, like that's cool, they made their own decisions. Doesn't mean that it's also not a weird thing. Cool, you guys are fucking adults, you go and do your thing. Doesn't mean I got him to like at least agree with the point of like Hugh Hefner being around all the freaking like 20-year-old supermodels, kind of weird, kind of creepy, but they're still consenting.
For the girls, it was.
You can go and make their own life choices.
Well, the dynamic is right. It's not just for the girls. It's weird for the guy too.
Hugh Hefner loved it. I'm telling you, he wasn't feeling creepy.
Well, loving it doesn't mean it's not weird. It just
he didn't view it as weird.
It's more.
Well,
he
may have.
Weird. It was apparently and this is coming out from individuals who were there at the time, that it was quite abusive. So you remember keeping up the
it was abusive.
Not keeping up the Kardashians. The Hef's E Network a show.
Yeah, they had a show.
Yeah, the show. Yeah.
The main woman there, the main one, she was extremely very very fucking pretty. But his main girlfriend at the time, she came out. She talked about how like he did the classic abuse thing where he like tried to separate her from everyone else, right? Like complete reliance on him. Like don't talk to your family, don't have work outside of this. Tactics. She enjoyed apparently being like a waitress or something, I don't know. And he like took that away from her. Like she had to just be there for Hef. So take that for what you will. But
well, they're consenting adults, so right. Like our original argument was everyone's okay with it because morally they're adults to make the choices. But
to be clear, I was the only one who spoke out against that, by the way.
Well, there's also a difference between a line rule for consent on age and
that's not true.
No. So we all agree that coercion can happen to an adult, right?
Absolutely.
So the difference between when we're talking about 50 to 18, it sounds like we're very distinctly talking about the age differential. In which case, we would say most people at some point in time have a developmental age where they can consent. That is different than a conversation about does an adult have a power differential over another adult?
Exactly. The legality of it being 18, is it really that clean cut? Now, obviously, the answer is no, but legally it is. So now we're in this.
No. There's different things though. Power differential. You can get convicted for something that's not an age-based.
All the abusive things that Prime just outlined that you.
I want to hear that though.
Just real quick, all the abusive things that Prime outlined that Hugh Hefner was allegedly doing to this lady, that happens when there is no age gap as well. These aren't like the age gap had nothing to do with that, right? It was the fact that he was doing these abusive things. Because I've seen people who have done that classic thing of isolating someone, making them totally reliant on them. I've seen this in high school relationships, right? Like with people who are both in high school. This happens. It's not an age thing. It's a thing.
We were looking earlier to see if we could separate distinct and unique like objective areas of the exploitation based on that you only see in relationships of age gaps. And if Palmsy, if you have something that you could suggest in that space, then there might be a case for us to step out of this morality space, moral judgment, into objective judgment.
Of what? What are you asking me to do? Sorry.
Well, I thought you well.